Don't drink the Kool-Aid is a common expression in business and politics, and it means to be gullible and fall for a person or idea that seems nice but is actually harmful on the inside. However, the origin of the phrase is actually a very interesting story about a socialist cult, which was led by Jim Jones, who is pictured here. And he was a charismatic and yet evil person who caused the Jonestown Massacre on November 18th, 1978, which resulted in the death of 918 people. A third of those dead were babies or children, and it was the single deadliest deliberate act of American civilians prior to 9/11. Now, the origins of the cult stemmed in the 1950s, where Jim Jones was a fiery preacher who, rather than traditional Christianity, favored communism over the American capitalist system. In fact, throughout the hippie era, he grew his following up to nearly 1,000 people and made his presence known by many government officials and many people in the country. In 1973, he and about 1,000 followers decided to move permanently to a compound in South America, in an extremely remote area in a place called Guyana. And this compound was to abide by Marxist principles and for them to have Jim Jones as the leader and to live by the principles of their cult without having to deal with the Americans who didn't agree with them. Members would work all day and often have meetings late into the night. They are supposed to be agriculturally. Actually, I'm going to show a picture of what the compound looked like. And they were supposed to be agriculturally sustainable, but they actually had a low food supply, and many of the children were very malnourished. Jones was the only person with any communication with the outside world whatsoever. A Californian congressman named Leo Ryan actually was made aware of abuse allegations in this cult and decided to go investigate. In 1978, he brought with him his aide and also some family members of the cult, and they were going to see whether things were okay or whether there's abuse going on and whether people were allowed to come with them. Now, Jim Jones actually became terrified about this and was worried that the group would be exposed, so he began training the members on how to prepare. He trained them to say that they had plenty to eat and that they were not anti-American or pro-Soviet. And he trained them to say that life was great there. He also began a thing called white night drills, which is where late into the night an alarm would go off signifying that there needed to be an emergency meeting. In these drills, he would preach to the people about what to do if they were under attack or needed to commit suicide, and they would even pretend to commit suicide to prepare themselves for this and to show their commitment. Now that brings me to my next point, which is what happened on November 18th, 1978. So Leo Ryan arrived in a private jet, and at first he completely fell for the story that things were going well there. He became friends with many members and even told his aide that he was going to give a good report on it and that it was basically in good terms. However, shortly before leaving, he was given a note by members saying that they were scared and wanted him to get them out of there. And when he confronted Jim Jones about this, Jim Jones denied it at first, but then he became very angry and told the followers that they needed to get revenge on the people who wanted to leave and also on the congressman. The congressman was attacked with a knife and fled, and he was then chased down. And while at his private jet, he and some other members were brutally assassinated. In fact, Leo Ryan died after being shot over 20 times. After this happened, Jones' wife told everyone in the compound that things were okay and they could go back in their residences. But this was not the case. Jones and other members then began preparing vaults of knockoff Kool-Aid laced with potassium cyanide for about 30 minutes. And the fact that such substances were already in storage ready for use shows just how demented Jones was. He then held a white night meeting and convinced the members that they were under attack and needed to commit revolutionary suicide in order to show commitment to the cause. Although some members drank it voluntarily, there is very, very strong evidence that the majority did not. This is why modern historians refer to it more as a mass murder than a mass suicide. And here is a picture of all the bodies after the incident. there were over 900 in the compound. And actually, after the first day, they only thought there were about 300, but there ended up being about 3 layers of bodies. Jim Jones would die last, shooting himself with a revolver. And this is a picture of the knockoff Kool-Aid and also some needles, because some people injected each other with needles. One of the few survivors is Stephen Jones, Jim Jones' son, who still lives today. Some of the survivors pretended to be dead or hid under a tree or something. Well, Stephen Jones today says that his father knew it was a lie all along, and that he does believe his father was truly evil. The sad story of the Jonestown Massacre shows how important it is to critically think for oneself and to not drink the Kool-Aid.